Joseph's. I'm the Reverend Mother Kassinda Ellis. St. Joseph's is an Episcopal church in the heart of Queens Village with a vibrant community dedicated to putting God's words into action. Our church community is a family that comes together every Sunday for worship and fellowship, which is why I am so happy that you could join us. Thank you, and please continue to follow us on our webpage or on Facebook. Have a blessed day. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, 'Look, here is the bridegroom. Come out to meet him.' Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise replied, 'No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves.' And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the other bridesmaids came and also saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' But he replied, 'Truly, I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Amen.
And we all know the tragedy that happened when we got home last Sunday, where we lost some of our own fellow brothers and sisters as they were worshiping in their sanctuaries. And these are the times when you try to figure out why. What's going on? You know, the news says, well, it's a mental issue, and that the person had a mental issue, and you think, well, there are plenty of people with mental issues. Many of us have them. Yet, the question still remains, why? It doesn't explain the loss of so many lives. And so we gather here again on Sunday, faithfully, but there's still, I don't know about you, always that little fear and paranoia. Could that happen here at St. Joseph's? But it's interesting, as we have this in our mind, this past weekend, or we had the convention, and we passed a resolution that encouraged all the churches within our diocese to become sanctuary churches. Churches that open their doors to the other, those who live on the outskirts, those undocumented individuals who are trying to make their way into this country, trying to make a living in this country. We have agreed as a diocese to open our doors. Open the doors of the church. So you have on one hand an incident that makes you want to lock up the doors once we know everyone is in, that we know is in. And yet we are being faithful to our Christian call to care for all of God's children. And so we open the doors of the church. And we let all who are in need in, because all are welcome. Now, we hear the gospel this morning, and the gospel talks about the doors being shut. But in the gospel, we meet the 10 bridesmaids. 5 who were smart, and 5 who were not so smart. 5 who got themselves together and put themselves in order, and 5 who were just so excited to meet the bridegroom that they forgot themselves. And so when the bridegroom came, the bridesmaids who were ready, and they met him. And the others had to go and do what they needed to do. And the bridegroom came and saw them at the door and said, I don't know you. And, you know, our Christian faith, it tells us to be kind, right? It tells us to share, right? So what happened when these 5 bridesmaids asked the other 5 bridesmaids, please, give us some of your all. You're supposed to share, right? That's what we know. But there comes a time in everybody's Christian faith and walk in life that you can't share somebody else's faith. You'll have to do it on your own. And that's what Jesus is pointing to in this particular gospel. It's not about sharing. The bridesmaids have shared as much as they can share. This time it's about our individual walk with Christ. You know, it's often when you say there comes a point where you come to church not because someone tells you to, but because you yourself want to. Because if you're coming because someone else is telling you, you're living on someone else's faith. And Jesus says when God calls you home, you yourself better be ready. Don't try to take someone else's faith, because that cannot be shared in that way. And so the gospel is telling us that we have to be prepared. We have to be ready, because we do not know the hour, the day, or the time when God is going to call us home. Our brothers and sisters left their homes last week, came to church, and they didn't know that would be their last day. You don't know when God or where God is going to call you home. You do think that you would come to church and you would be safe. And it makes you wonder, is nothing sacred anymore? But this is a sanctuary. And it's God's church. And so at some point you have to say, what better place to go home than in God's church? This tragedy gives us reason to pause and to think and to reflect on what is God calling us as Christians to do. Is it to create more laws that make no more sense than the laws that came before it? Is it to reprimand the gun people who make these regulations? Is it to come down? Where do we want to place blame in these situations as they increase more and more? My brothers and sisters, if we don't look at ourselves, there's no one else to blame. Because we are our brother's keepers. When our brothers and sisters are going in a path and we know and we see, sometimes we just say we saw it, but we didn't do anything about it. We saw that our brother or sister was in need, but I was too busy to deal with it. We make all kinds of excuses to do the right thing at the right time so that when tragedy hits, we're all, oh my goodness. When tragedy hits, we collect together and somehow we remember our humanity, that we are to care for someone that's in need. When tragedy hits, you see the world or the country come together like nobody's business. But that's not necessarily the only time we are called to come together. We are called to come together all the time. When we leave these doors, we're called to take care of our brothers and sisters. As you know that we are studying our baptismal covenant in depth this whole year, and so we are at the question, do you believe in Jesus Christ, the Son of God? And we say, we do. We say, I believe. Well, if you believe, then why are we not doing as Christ taught us to do out in the world and caring for the brokenhearted? Taking care of our brothers and sisters. Making sure that they know that they are loved and cared for. That maybe we don't understand what you're going through, but we're not going to leave you alone to walk through it by yourselves. Why do we have to wait till tragedy hits to say we coulda, shoulda, woulda? We are called to be prepared at all times. Prepared to meet the stranger. I find it ironic that the church has to pass a resolution for the churches to provide sanctuary in the sanctuary. Right? That we have to be put on record to say we will care for the undocumented. We will care for those victims of terror, those victims who are being victimized simply for who they are. We will open the doors to the strangers. Why do we have to put that into the rules and regulations of the church when that is what we promised to do in our baptismal covenant? We promise to seek justice for all. We promise to see God in our brothers and sisters, so that the doors of the church should always remain open. And I know that it's a difficult choice. It's a difficult decision, because we don't know who's going to walk through our doors. And we're scared. And we're afraid. And that's what the world would want us to have. That's what the devil would want us to have. Someone said to me on this week, Mother Ellis, you did say that the devil came to church. And I'm like, okay. The devil comes to church. But there are plenty of good people that come to church. There are plenty of people who need healing that come to church. There are plenty of people who have been beaten down by the world outside who need to come to church, so the doors will remain open. Because it's not just about the two doors out there, but it's about the doors of your own hearts. Because God calls for us to have our hearts open to those out there who need to be loved, who need to know that it's okay to be who you are, the way God created you to be. That's That's what we are called to do if we say boldly, I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in my brother and sisters out there. I don't know if I shared this story, but I always like it because there are two parts of being at St. Augustine that I will never, ever, ever forget. They're etched into my mind. And that's the first one is the image of the guy that came with a machete into the church. And I was at the altar, and he was way back there with the ushers. And I remember because it was a Wednesday service, so it was our senior service, so it was our senior ushers. And there were no men back there. And I could see the terror on their faces as to what exactly is this man going to do with this machete walking in here boldly. And he came and he stood at the center of the aisle. He pointed his sword up, or his machete up, pointed it that way, towards me, and I was just like, towards me, okay. And then he knelt down and prayed, and then walked out of the church. And in that moment, I prayed that whatever it was that he was intending to do with that machete, that it was something that was going to result in a positive light. But when I told my boss at the time that this had happened, he said, Kassinda, the doors of the church will remain open for all to walk through. Because in that moment, he needed bread. Lucky it was a machete. Right? But the second image was my last image of St. Augustine's, where, unbeknownst to all of us, the church was filled to capacity. There was standing room only, and unbeknownst to us who were singing and praying and getting ready for the gospel procession, the ushers had been battling someone in the parish hall for quite a while. And the ushers at the time, the men were there, and they're not small men, they were big men, and they were fighting this guy, and somehow he still was able to get away from them. He came into the church, ran up the center aisle, flipped the altar over, and then ran back out. This is the church. And for some reason, that man was angry in the moment. What I laughed about, after I was kind of like, what's going on, was the fact that my acolytes, who were as skinny as a toothpick, the young boys, they puffed up their chest and went out to go after him. I thought to myself, at the end of service, I told them, why didn't you take the cross and the incense and all those other things with you? Because at least you would have had some weapon. What were you going to do by yourself? Right? But they were just so angry. He can't come into our church and just overturn the altar. But I said, but you do know that church went on, right? When you went out there chasing after him, we flipped the altar back over. The altar guild ladies came up faithfully, reset the altar, and we continued on the church. Because the church doors must remain open for all to be welcome to come through those doors. We cannot allow the fear that the world wants us to have to enter into the church. Because once it enters into the church, what are we worshiping? What are we doing? Jesus told us to be ready and prepared at any time. Any time, any moment, he can call us home. So we have to be ready and prepared. We can't live in fear of what is happening in the world. If we want to make a difference, the fear is not going to make the difference. It's standing up to the things that are happening. This weekend was my mother's birthday, so she turned 77. And she's probably going to say, why are you telling me it in church and why you have it on camera, my age? But she's turning 77, and I'm happy to have her here because, there's so many times that we didn't know she was going to be here. And so I'm happy. And so she said to me, Kassinda, I want to go to Atlantic City. And I said, I'm not going to Atlantic City. I'm going to convention. And even if I wasn't going to convention, I don't want you to go to Atlantic City. You know how I feel. And she said, I don't care. I'm going to Atlantic City. So she hired some strangers to take her to Atlantic City. And so, of course, I'm all living in fear. Like, Mom, something can happen to you. See, now, I'm preaching one way and thinking another, right? But the reality is, my mom said, Kassinda, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. There is nothing you can do about it, right? And this is the same woman who told me if you're going to die in the plane, and if you don't get on the plane, God will send the plane to land on your head, so get on the plane, right? We can't live our lives in fear. She says, I want to live my life, right? We're going to die. That's inevitable, right? I know one of my good colleagues says, I don't want to die. I just want to be caught up in the rapture. I said, well, it's not up to you, right? So be ready. Be prepared. But live a life so that when when the bridegroom comes, he knows your name, right? That your lamp is filled with oil, so he can say, well done, good and faithful servant. That's what we are called to do. Service out into the world, to walk like Christ. To not think about, oh, how tragic, and then go back to our normal lives. No, we're called to be brothers and sisters, fighting that good fight. Walking and journeying with those who may not think like us, who may not look like us, who may not see life the same way as us, but we still love you. That we're not going to wait till tragedy. We're going to care for you right now. We're going to stop this bleeding right now, before the blood gets everywhere. These are what we're called to do as brothers and sisters. It's what our diocese has declared boldly in the resolution that we passed, that our doors will not be closed, but they will be open to all whom God sends us. Amen. Amen.